and welcome to Training Tuesday, where we go through weekly tips and tricks to make your career just a little bit more awesome. This week, we are digging into self-sabotage and upper limits. And this is something that's come up on a couple of calls recently, and so I realized it was probably time to share with the wider audience. Because if you have not heard of this term before, I will teach you. It is incredibly helpful. Now, the term upper limit is based on the work of Gay Hendricks, who is an author of the book The Big Leap. And in his book, he talks all about upper limits as these thresholds that we have for comfort with all of the good stuff in our life. And essentially what he says is this. He says that each person feels that they're worthy of a certain amount of goodness. And once you hit that threshold of everything's going great, then sometimes unintentionally, people will start to do stuff to get themselves back into that comfort zone of, I'm a lot more comfortable with like a lot of things going well, but not everything going well. And this might seem counterintuitive, right? This might seem like something that you're like, of course I don't do that. Why would I do that? That seems crazy. But unfortunately, I see it a lot, right? I see so often people who are having questions. It often comes back to a worth thing, right? And I see people who are having everything going right, and all of a sudden they start making stupid mistakes, or they start doing stuff that they know better than to do, right? And so you see this pattern come up for a lot of people. And obviously what it tends to be is coming back to, I'm a lot more comfortable when like most things are going well, but not everything. I don't know how to let myself just fully embrace how awesome this is being right now. And again, it seems counterintuitive. I think there are definitely some things in his book where he talks about people getting sick and doing all these things of self-sabotage, which I tend to think, I'm like, well, sometimes you just happen to be sitting next to someone with the flu on the bus, and that's not really you trying to do that to yourself, right? But I do think there's a lot of validity in this concept because it's something that I see so often. So that's this issue that we tend to see with people. And of course, no one wants that, right? We all want to embrace all the good things going on for us. We want to go up, up, up and continue to go up without running our heads into, a ceiling and feeling uncomfortable. And so because we want to embrace more of the good, but because this issue happens so much, what I want you to do is start to identify if you are guilty of any of this self-sabotage, and if so, what is your go-to tactic, right? So that is your tip for this week. I want you to ask yourself, have I ever done this? Have I ever self-sabotaged when I was having everything go too well? And if so, what is my go-to tactic for when things are going great? So personal example, for me, when I had my first biggest month ever, it was an income threshold in my business that I was really looking towards and really excited about. And when I hit that for myself, I started to panic unintentionally, right? I didn't realize that I was panicking until the next month I noticed, I was like, why am I finding such fault on all of my exploratory calls? There were a couple of calls where I got them where I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm doubting myself. I'm doubting my ability to really screen new clients, and I'm doubting that these people are actually going to be the right fit. And I had to take a second, stop, and look at myself and say, wait a second, are these true concerns about clients, or is this me trying to make things not go as well or find fault with things that don't necessarily have fault? And so what I had to really do was go on paper and say, nope, they meet every single criteria for a great new client. I have to trust that would be a great fit, opposed to that voice in the back of my head saying that like, maybe it won't work out, maybe it won't work out, right? And so that's sometimes what it looks like. That's definitely for me, my go-to tactic that I know is I'll start to find fault with things that don't necessarily have fault or are great on paper. And so I know to look out for that of like, hey, when things start going really well, just keep an eye out for that next month when you start to be like really challenging for any of these calls, right? So I want you to think about if this is something I've ever done, and if so, what's my go-to tactic? Is it avoiding things altogether? Is it working so long that I don't get any sleep and then all of a sudden I get really burnt out, right? What is my go-to thing? I have a client whose go-to thing is anytime stuff starts going really well in work, she tends to find more fault in relationships she's in. And so it's super interesting to see how exactly this happens, because sometimes we can catch ourselves going into that pattern. And so I want you to think about this. Think if there is anything coming up for you that's a self-sabotage thing. And ultimately, think a little bit about that self-worth, because that's what it all comes back to. Okay, so that is my tip for you this week. If you need any sort of support with identifying this in yourself, definitely reach out to me. This is what I do with clients day in and day out. I'm here to help, so if any of this resonates, know that I've got your back, but get started with that exercise and start actually asking yourself those bigger questions around self-worth and any of those bad self-sabotaging habits, okay? So start there, and in the meantime, happy working!